Jayden grew up in a small, worn-down wooden house on the edge of a dusty street where life felt like it had forgotten him. His father had disappeared years ago, leaving only memories that felt like shadows, and his mother worked tirelessly, washing clothes in neighbors' homes, scrubbing floors, and doing anything she could to make ends meet. Most days, they barely had enough rice for dinner, and Jayden often went to bed with an empty stomach. He was small and frail for his age, with eyes that seemed older than his years, carrying a quiet sadness that no one could fix. Yet, despite the hardships, Jayden had one gift that made him feel alive: his voice. He discovered it one rainy evening when he had nowhere to run, huddled on the rooftop of his home, the rain soaking through his thin shirt. The sound of the rain was loud, almost unbearable, but when he started humming a tune, the world seemed to pause. The music flowed out of him like a river that had been waiting to escape, soft at first, then rising into a melody that seemed to carry the weight of his whole life. The neighbors, who had grown used to hearing only the struggles of the street, stopped to listen. The shopkeeper leaned against the doorway, drying his hands, and even the stray dogs seemed to pause, ears pricked, as if mesmerized. Jayden didn't think of himself as special. Singing wasn't about being noticed, it was the only way he could breathe freely, the only way he could make sense of the loneliness that surrounded him. By afternoon, Jayden would wander the streets, walking barefoot on broken pavement, clutching a small, battered guitar his father had left behind. Sometimes he would sing quietly to himself, other times he would try to mimic songs he heard on the old radio at the corner store. People in the neighborhood began to notice the boy who could make a simple song feel like a story of love, loss, and hope all at once. Yet, most days, he stayed invisible, just another child among many struggling to survive. One afternoon, he found himself sitting outside a small grocery store, strumming his guitar and quietly humming a song that had formed in his head overnight. He was lost in the music, the notes wrapping around his heart, when a woman with a bright camera phone stopped to listen. She was a tourist visiting from another country, her eyes wide as she watched Jayden perform without fear or expectation. After a while, she asked him if she could record him. Jayden hesitated, shuffling his feet nervously. The last time anyone had paid attention, it hadn't meant anything. But there was something about the way she smiled, encouraging and kind, that made him nod. He lifted his voice, and suddenly the world seemed to bend around him. His notes floated over the heads of people passing by, catching them unawares. Cars slowed, pedestrians paused, and even the grocer stepped out, wiping his hands on his apron. Jayden's voice was raw and real, carrying every ounce of the sadness he had kept hidden. People began to gather, forming a small circle around him. Some took out their phones, recording, whispering to each other about the miracle they were witnessing. When he finished, there was a long, stunned silence, followed by applause. Jayden looked down at his hands, feeling a warmth he had never felt before, and for the first time, he realized that his voice didn't just belong to him, it belonged to anyone willing to listen. The tourist handed him a few bills, enough for his mother to buy food for a few days. But Jayden barely noticed. Instead, he felt a flicker of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, his voice could change more than his own world. That night, as he lay under the thin roof of his small home, he closed his eyes and hummed again, letting the melody carry him away from the harsh reality outside. For the first time in his life, he felt that life could hold something better, something brighter. 2 days after the tourist recorded Jayden's performance, the video appeared online with the caption, "His story is sad, but his voice is magic." Jayden didn't know what that meant at first. He had never used a smartphone, and the idea of the world watching him felt impossible. But within hours, the video exploded across social media. Comments flooded in, strangers from across the globe sending messages of awe, encouragement, and disbelief. People were sharing the clip as if it were a treasure they had discovered, and Jayden's quiet corner of the world began to feel smaller and brighter all at once. By the next morning, reporters had arrived at his street. Cameras were set up on tripods, microphones waved toward his face, and strangers crowded around, murmuring questions he barely understood. His mother, overwhelmed and shy, tried to shield him, brushing her hands through her hair and mumbling apologies for the mess of their home. Jayden stood frozen at first, unsure if he was allowed to sing or just stand there like a statue. But the moment someone asked him to perform, his fear melted. He lifted his voice, and it flowed like a river, soulful, powerful, and filled with everything he had kept locked inside for years. The camera lights didn't scare him, they seemed to guide him. The world had been waiting to hear his story, and finally, they were listening. The publicity caught the attention of talent scouts and television producers. Jayden couldn't believe it when he received a call from a famous TV host in the United States, someone he had only seen on his mother's old TV once or twice. The message was simple: "We want to see him. America's Got Talent wants to hear his voice." Jayden stared at the phone, unsure if he was dreaming. His mother held it in her hands, trembling, asking repeatedly if it was real. They weren't rich, didn't have passports, didn't even know where to start, but suddenly, the impossible was becoming real. Within days, arrangements were made, passports were applied for, visas secured, flights booked, and Jayden found himself stepping into an airplane for the first time in his life. The plane lifted off, and Jayden pressed his face against the window, watching the streets and rooftops of his neighborhood shrink below him. He thought of the cracked walls of his home, the dusty street where he had sung for coins, and the mother who had worked herself to exhaustion just to feed him. A lump formed in his throat, and he whispered, almost to himself, "I'm gonna make you proud, Mom." His mother held his hand tightly, tears streaking her face, unable to believe that her small, quiet boy was now soaring into a world she had never dared to dream of. The journey wasn't just across miles, it was a crossing from struggle to possibility, from darkness to light. As the plane touched down in the United States, Jayden felt a mix of excitement and terror. Everything was different: the language, the people, the buildings towering high above him. He felt tiny, almost invisible, but the magic in his voice reminded him that no matter where he went, he carried a power that couldn't be measured by fear or walls. He rehearsed quietly in the hotel room, strumming his guitar and humming melodies that had carried him through hardship, hoping he could translate his life into song for an audience that had no idea what he had endured. The day of the audition arrived, and Jayden felt the weight of the world pressing on his small shoulders. Yet, in the quiet moments before stepping onto the stage, he closed his eyes and remembered the rooftop, the dusty streets, and the faces of people who had once stopped to listen. This wasn't just about talent, it was about hope, survival, and sharing a piece of his heart with the world. When his name was called, Jayden took a deep breath, lifted his voice, and for the first time, he truly understood the power of the words that had traveled across oceans. His story might be sad, but his voice was magic. The America's Got Talent stage was enormous, almost intimidating, with bright lights that blinded Jayden for a moment as he stepped onto it. The roar of the crowd hit him like a wave, and for a second, he felt paralyzed. His legs shook, his hands trembled, and his heart pounded so loud he thought it might burst. Backstage, he had tried to calm himself, breathing in and out slowly, but nothing prepared him for the scale of this moment. His mother sat in the audience, gripping her own hands tightly, her eyes red from tears. She had carried him through the hardest parts of life, and now she was watching her son face a stage that could change everything. Jayden swallowed hard, whispered a small prayer, and took a step forward. When the judges asked him to introduce himself, he barely spoke above a whisper. "My name is Jayden, and I just want to make my mom's life better." The simplicity of his words hung in the air, met with a silence that was almost deafening. Then, the music started, soft and melodic, and Jayden closed his eyes. He let the story of his life pour out of him through the song, the long nights with nothing to eat, the loneliness of abandoned streets, the hope he clung to when no one believed in him. His voice soared, delicate and powerful at the same time, carrying the raw emotion of a child who had lived far beyond his years. The audience was mesmerized, people stopped clapping for a moment just to listen. Halfway through, he hit a note so pure it sent chills down everyone's spine. Judges' mouths fell open, the crowd erupted in cheers, and the camera caught every tear, every smile, every gasp of disbelief. Jayden didn't notice any of it. He was lost in the music, in the story he had always wanted to tell, in the feeling that for the first time, the world was hearing his heart. When the song ended, the theater erupted into a standing ovation. One of the judges, overwhelmed, slammed the golden buzzer. Confetti rained down like gold, and Jayden collapsed onto his knees, tears streaming down his face. It wasn't just a victory, it was a release, a culmination of all the years he had spent surviving through song. Overnight, Jayden became a sensation. Clips of his performance were shared millions of times across social media, and people everywhere were talking about the boy with the magical voice. Interviews, magazine covers, and television appearances followed. Yet, despite all the fame and attention, Jayden remained the same humble, soft-spoken boy who had grown up on the dusty streets. He never forgot where he came from, and he used his newfound platform to help his mother and the children in his old neighborhood. With the money he earned, he rebuilt their home, started a small business for his mother, and bought musical instruments for the kids who reminded him of himself. Even with the world watching, Jayden's greatest joy remained singing for those who truly needed to hear it. In interviews, when asked what he wanted most, he always gave the same answer: "I just want to sing, and make people feel less alone." His story resonated because it wasn't just about talent, it was about hope, resilience, and the power of a voice to change a life. People didn't just love his music, they loved the courage behind it, the heartache and determination that shaped every note. Jayden had turned every struggle into a melody, every tear into a song, and every hardship into hope. As the lights dimmed and the applause faded, Jayden knew that this was only the beginning. He had stepped onto a stage to sing, but what he had truly done was show the world that even in sadness, there can be magic. His voice was more than just sound, it was a lifeline for anyone who had ever felt invisible, a reminder that hope could survive even in the darkest corners. And for Jayden, it was proof that dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed, could come true if you held on tight enough and let your heart sing louder than your fears.